Hello, everyone joining from home. We are getting started tonight with a free GMAT prep hour. I can see all of your comments in chat, so please let me know if you have questions as we go. I'd love to have a session that's as interactive as possible. I am seeing some notes in chat right now about length of time spent studying. So I'd love to kick these off with that question and better understand where everyone is coming from. I'm seeing that one person has been studying for over a year, some for just a couple of weeks. There is no wrong time to join these sessions, so you can certainly pick and choose the sessions that work best for you, but these are all really geared toward wherever you might be in your studying, honestly, especially this one tonight. For those of you who sound like you maybe have some questions about how long to spend studying, it's a really good question. It really depends on what your goal score is and where you're scoring now. So if you haven't taken a practice test recently, that's the first step that I would recommend for you. Just make sure that you understand where you're at right now and where you want to be. And then really thoroughly review those practice exams. Those are really your diagnosis tools. So it's just like when you go to the doctor, you get a diagnosis and they ask you a bunch of questions to figure out what might be wrong with you, and then they can help to correct that problem. Your practice exams are your diagnosis tools. Those are letting you know exactly what you need to work on specifically. So don't just take them and forget them. Make sure that you're taking them and then really thoroughly reviewing them to figure out what do you need to tweak for the future. Excellent. I see some folks from all over the place as well, from Toronto, from Jamaica. That is awesome. I always love these sessions because I get to see where everyone is from, and we're joining from all over the place now, especially with COVID. More free options. So I always like to talk about this at the beginning too, and I know other instructors do as well. We do have free live classes that are the first course sessions of each course that runs. These are really helpful because it gives you a sense of what is going to be taught in the class, gives you a sense of the instructors and their different teaching styles as well. These are teaching sessions as well. So when you go to that first course session, it is not just kind of a marketing spiel, anything like that. You really will be learning content specifically. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into some topics, then it might be a good idea to go to those. Typically in that first live class session, we're going to be covering data sufficiency and sentence correction. So if those are weaker areas for you, then definitely consider joining us. I have a course starting on June 9th. So I will pull that up at the end if anyone would like to join. Try our interactive on-demand course as well. You can get a free trial of that to dig into some of our other resources. We definitely try to put out a lot of free prep options, including these sessions. The final resource that I would love to direct you to is our chat forum as well. So we do take student questions via chat forum. I'd love to hear actually in the chat, have any of you gone out to that chat forum and gotten any questions answered? I know it's a really helpful place. We've got some good instructors who are monitoring it. Oh, great. Himansha, you started preparing in mid-March and taken 2 practice tests. Great. Yeah, and you want to take a practice test about every couple of weeks, ideally, as you prepare. Once you get a little bit closer to your test date, you can take it about every week to 10 days. Do not just take them to take them, though. Again, make sure that you're taking them periodically, but not too much, because it'll just wear you out. All right. So tonight, our focus, the big reveal, we are going to be covering how to read. A lot of you are probably thinking, but I already know how to read. So what are we going to be talking about tonight? Specifically tonight, we're going to be talking about reading better. So the way that you've been reading is probably fine and good. It's gotten you through this far in life. But on the GMAT, you just don't have time to waste, right? You don't have time to lose. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how do you get really good at reading these passages and feeling and doing so effectively. And then this idea of less is more. I have seen a lot of students struggle with both of these concepts that we're going to cover. This has been a consistent theme for me recently, and that is exactly why I decided to cover it tonight. I had a student not long ago who was really struggling with reading comprehension, and we went over some practice passages together, and they were just really not getting it. But we went over this particular lesson together, and afterwards, wow, they went from just 0 to hero overnight, it felt like. So I think it's going to be very helpful for everyone here. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to read this one. Because we're covering reading comprehension, of course, we have a reading passage to look at together. I will give you about 2 minutes here. Take a couple of minutes and read through it on your own. Okay, that was 2.5 minutes. That's around ideal timing for a reading comprehension passage to spend. This one's a little bit longer, especially, right? You might have noticed. So you can definitely give yourself a little bit more time. Anywhere from about 2 to 3 minutes in length is really ideal timing. You really don't want to be spending more than 3 minutes reading a passage because you're probably not going to remember all the detail anyhow, right? Okay, so you see this note here at the bottom of this passage. This is how many GMAT students read RC passages for the first time. So what we're focused on tonight is that first read through. How do you read a passage when it first pops on the screen? Now I'm going to do something here and demonstrate exactly how I have seen many of my students read a reading comprehension passage for the first time. Around 1960, mathematician Edward Lawrence found unexpected behavior in apparently simple equations representing atmospheric airflows. Whenever he reran his model with the same inputs, different outputs resulted, although the model lacked any random elements. Lorenz realized that tiny rounding errors in the initial data mushroomed over time, leading to erratic results. His finding marked a seminal moment in the development of chaos theory, which, despite its name, has little to do with randomness. Lorenz's experiment. Whew! I have seen so many people do exactly this. In chat, please note whether you are going to remember anything from what I just read. How much of what I read to you do you think that you could actually remember if I had just read it and you had not seen it on the screen? I'm saying 60%, not much, not a lot, none. Yeah, absolutely. Cody, yeah, one line. Probably some pieces are gonna stick out, maybe like really important words, but not a lot, right? And I see so many students go through and read exactly like that. Ultimately, what's gonna happen, and I'm sure that at least some of you have found yourselves doing this, what's gonna happen is that you're gonna read this first paragraph, you're gonna get to the end of it, and you're gonna think, wait, what was that paragraph about? And then you're gonna go back and read that first paragraph again. Now, when you only have 2 to 3 minutes to read a passage, you do not have time to go back and read paragraphs over and over and over again. You simply do not. To counteract this, when you look at reading comprehension passages, what you want to look at isn't just, I need to get better at reading. It's how do you get better at reading? And it really starts with how you read, ultimately. All right. So analysis of this. My approach here, reading each individual word, but really doing so in a monotone, right? Something that's easy to forget, something that people are not going to want to pay attention to. If I was talking like that right now, you guys would be like so tuned out. Rarely stopping to synthesize, right? We'll likely need to reread that passage several times. So not really stopping to pause and think, wait, what did I just read? Instead, just kind of going through and making it all the way to the end or pretty close and then stopping and trying to think about what you read. Super easy to feel overwhelmed when reading like this. Really unlikely to remember the detail or even really to understand the main idea. For those of you who have purchased some of our Manhattan Prep materials, you will know that the first read through is not about remembering detail. It really is not. What it is about is understanding that main idea. The reason it's not about the detail is because you will not remember all of the detail anyway. I can just guarantee you that. You'll get to the end of the passage, you'll see a detail question, you'll still need to go back to the passage. So what you want to do is focus that first read through on what really, really matters. So I am going to show you how I read reading comprehension passages for the first time. I'm actually going to go through the whole passage and read this one because I think it's really important to see how my mindset shifts as I go throughout. All right. Around 1960, mathematician Edward Lorenz found unexpected behavior in apparently simple equations representing atmospheric airflows. Okay, so we've got something apparently simple, but something unexpected happened that he didn't realize, that he didn't predict. Whenever he reran his model with the same inputs, different outputs resulted, although the model lacked any random elements. So again, this is what I would expect to see here because he saw something that was unexpected. Lorenz realized that tiny rounding errors, at this point, I am realizing that the rest of this paragraph is probably just detail about what's unexpected. I do not care about detail in my first read through. What I am going to do at this point as a good GMAT test taker is skip to the next paragraph. The reason I am doing that is because, again, I don't care about detail in the first read through. I want the main idea. When we think about the way that a paragraph is structured, first sentence is typically your topic sentence. Next sentence is some support. Then you get into detail. I'm skipping past that. All right, so now I'm skipping to paragraph 2. Lorenz's experiment was one of the first to demonstrate conclusively that unpredictability can arise from deterministic equations, which do not involve chance outcomes. Wow, that is a lot to unpack. I'm already thinking back to what I read in paragraph 1, and I know that he was doing some experiments and unexpected things happened. Now I'm seeing that his experiment was actually one of the first of its kind. It demonstrated something conclusively, and that something is related to unpredictability. I'm not sure exactly what that might be yet, but I know that it is related to what I'm seeing in that first paragraph. I'm going to read just a little bit further in that second paragraph here. In order to understand this phenomenon, first consider the non-chaotic system of 2 poppy seeds placed in a round bowl. Ooh, This just absolutely reeks of detail. At this point, we're talking about poppy seeds in a bowl, and my main idea is probably about a theory that mathematician Edward Lorenz came up with. I'm going to skip to the next paragraph. All right, chaotic systems. I'm going to pause here because in paragraph 2, I saw non-chaotic systems with these poppy seeds. In paragraph 3, I'm starting to see chaotic systems. So again, I don't exactly know how those relate to my main idea yet, but I know that we're kind of contrasting a couple of things here. Chaotic systems, such as a machine mixing bread dough, are characterized by both attraction and repulsion. So I'm thinking about that as like a push and a pull. As the dough is stretched, folded, and pressed back together, any poppy seeds sprinkled in are intermixed seemingly at random. This is detail. I am not going to take that any further. All right, so at this point, what I know is that this mathematician, he was working on some studies, something unexpected happened. It demonstrated something and was one of the first experiments to do so. Has something to do with chaotic and non-chaotic systems. Poppy seeds and bread dough seem to be maybe some examples. All right, going to the last paragraph. During the dough kneading process, 2 poppy seeds positioned next to each other eventually go their separate ways. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. If there are poppy seeds in dough and it's being mixed, then they would separate. Any early divergence or measurement error, this is detail, I do not care. Now this is the last paragraph, so instead of skipping and not reading any of this, what I'm gonna do is kind of start to scan through and figure out when we stopped talking about bread dough. All right, so I see any early divergence, nope, and then I see a period after unpredictable. It is this sense of dependence and not true randomness. This still feels like it's detail. According to the popular interpretation of the butterfly effect, this feels like it might be a good point to start reading again, honestly, because this feels like a change in pace from what they're talking about with the dough kneading. According to the popular interpretation of the butterfly effect, a butterfly flapping its wings causes hurricanes. A better understanding is that the butterfly causes uncertainty about the precise state of the air. This microscopic uncertainty grows until it encompasses hurricanes. Few meteorologists believe that we'll ever be able to predict rain or shine for a particular day years in the future. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, right? So if I'm thinking about butterfly effect, really what this is saying is that uncertainty can grow over time. Yeah, we can barely predict tomorrow's weather. I actually live in Southern California, so I can almost always predict tomorrow's weather because it's always sunny. But in most places, you cannot predict tomorrow's weather even. All right. In chat, please note how different, I guess, this read through was from that first example that I gave. What did I do differently this time? Yeah, no details, right? Man, I am avoiding those details like the plague. Work smarter, not harder. Priyanka, I love that answer because truly mastering the GMAT is really about working smarter, not harder. I promise you this. I am a solidly A- student in real life. I'm a good GMAT test taker because I am just a little bit lazy. Got the general gist of the passage, main points, stuck to the important bits. Yeah. How did I read it? Yes, I do read that like this when I read like a regular newspaper as well. Or if I read a book, I absolutely love to read. So the reason I'm doing this reading comprehension course tonight is because I absolutely love to read. RC passages are one of my biggest strengths on the GMAT because this is exactly how I read to myself. Yeah, Matthew, I emphasized important words. I really took time to understand their meaning. I'm not reading all the way through. I'm never really just rushing and trying to get to the end. I'm stopping periodically and thinking, well, wait a minute, does this match what I would expect to see? Does it not match what I would expect to see? Oh, I like this note here about average speed. Yeah, I'm not reading like a speed reader on this, and I don't need to. So I didn't time myself when I did it just now, but I have timed myself on this passage in the past. And I don't have to read quickly in order to get to the end in under 3 minutes. All right. A couple of the main things that I would point out from this, I had really high energy to remain engaged. What I love to describe this as is, if any of you have any small children in your lives at all, right? Or you have like a child yourself, or I have a nephew, he's 6 years old. You want to read to yourself as if you are reading to them, because your brain, while you are taking the GMAT, is kind of like a small child. It's a little bit overwhelmed. It's likely to get distracted. It can't really pay full attention. It's feeling just kind of rushed about the pace of things. You need to treat yourself and treat your brain as if you would treat that small child in your life. That is exactly why I come with that high energy, because I want to remain engaged. I know that if I read to my nephew and I don't stay high energy, man, his attention is gone. Stopping frequently to synthesize. So I was putting things in my own words periodically. I wasn't just getting through and listing off their words. I was really thinking about what I was reading to make sure that when I got to the end, I still remembered the main points from the beginning. I'm much more likely to understand the big picture idea. I'm purposely avoiding the detail. I absolutely know I won't remember it, but guess what? Even if you read it, you won't remember it anyway, probably. You may have some key words that stick with you, but ultimately it's a waste of time to read every single word on your screen. The other thing that I did, though, is that by reading one sentence from each paragraph and ensuring that I did that really consistently, I know that I can find the detail when I need it. So I have kind of a rough idea of what the passage structure is. On that first read through, that's your second goal. Goal number 1, main idea. Goal number 2, passage structure. You need to be able to tell yourself later where to find the answer to a detailed question. And then you'll go back and read that section. When you don't understand why the author is writing, ooh, do I reread the sentence? Sometimes I need to understand the sentence, right? So I think a good example of this, though, is this second paragraph here. So as you're looking at Lorenz's experiment was one of the first to demonstrate all of this right here. I read that and I thought, ooh, his experiment was one of the first to demonstrate something. So that's really important. That unpredictability can arise from deterministic equations which do not involve chance outcomes. I know that this has to do with unpredictability and chance outcomes. I don't know exactly what it means, to be honest. Like, I could reread it multiple times, but I'm also pretty convinced that it's just complex enough that I probably would need to read more detail to understand it. I'm not going to take the time to do that, though. I'm just going to get as close as I can on this first read. All right. So when you are reading your reading comprehension passages, I really want you to try this approach. I've described this to many of my students over time, and when they have started doing it, their reading comprehension just gets so much easier, because before this, I tell them, don't read the detail, ignore the detail, and then I do it for them and show them how to do this. And they say, wait a minute, you don't read any of the detail? And I say, no, that's what I've been telling you. Do not read the detail. And they find it's a lot easier to get through the passage in the time that they have. All right. I am also a very big fan of takeaways. So from this in chat, please write one takeaway that you have from this read through that you will carry through with you in the future. Here are some of the takeaways that I would list as being some of the most important, but ultimately you know best what you need specifically. And then I'm not done with you quite yet. Monica, I love it. Read with energy. I'm glad that's your takeaway. Perfect. Yep. Frequent pauses and avoid detail. I need to teach myself not to. That's a really good one. Yeah. So it's a tough thing to learn, right? So when you practice, what you want to do is practice this way. You have to make sure that every reading comprehension passage that you do individually, you create muscle memory for yourself so that when you're on a passage during the official exam and your brain is overwhelmed, that you do the thing that you have been doing. That muscle memory kicks in. And then you know that you won't just panic in the heat of the moment. How do I best identify what is detail? That is a really, really great question. Consistently, the way I like to think about it is that this is the structure of a paragraph. So as we think about a paragraph, what you want to think is that the beginning part of the paragraph gives you a topic sentence. That is definitely going to be part of the main idea, right? Even if you write your own essay, typically what you're told to do is write the introduction, topic sentence, description, topic sentence, description, conclusion. That's a well-structured passage. And that's what you're going to see on the GMAT most typically. So I know that topic sentence is here. In the middle, I'm going to have some kind of detail. And then at the end, I'm going to have a transition into the next paragraph. Sometimes I will read these transitions as well, those sentences, because sometimes they have some really helpful information. It just depends on how well I feel like I already understand the passage and how long the passage is. This was a really long passage. It's 4 paragraphs. The topic sentences in the middle, that just doesn't really happen all that often. Typically, you can feel pretty confident that that first sentence of each paragraph is contributing to that main idea. Yeah, very long indeed. Especially when I see longer passages like this, I know that I'm going to get bogged down and I'm going to get overwhelmed if I read every single word. So I will really make sure that I follow this process then. I'll fudge it just a little bit on shorter passages, but it's still really helpful to avoid that detail. And you'll see why, I think, in just a moment, because sometimes when you see main idea questions, it can get very easy to answer with a detail answer if you've read the detail. All right. So the next portion of this that we are going to tackle is answering just a few questions related to this passage. So you're going to see, how does this help you? How does this style of reading help you better answer questions as well? When you read an email from a boss, don't you have to pay attention to every word? That is a really good question. This is the way that the GMAT, why is this the way the GMAT recommends reading? It's not that they were recommending reading it this way, it's more that this is the best strategy for you to be successful. So this is the way that Manhattan Prep, and particularly me personally, would recommend reading. I'm curious though too, because I know that when I receive emails, I don't read every single word of the emails that I receive either. I trust sometimes that there are certain things that I need to pay attention to and certain things that I can pay a little bit less attention to. So I'm still kind of actually using this sort of a practice where I'm just sort of scanning for keywords and making sure that I understand what's being stated. Again, that matters too. It significantly matters in terms of who is sending the email. If it's my boss and they're saying you have to read this whole email, then I'm going to read the whole email. If it's a company-wide email and it's something that I know may or may not be important, may apply to me, may not, this is absolutely what I'm doing. If it's a really short email from a close coworker and I know that it's a project that I'm working on, then I'm reading every word. All right. So I'm going to give you all a minute and a half to read this question and come up with an answer to it. And I'm going to start that time right now. All right, that was a minute and a half. Again, that's ideal timing for answering a reading comprehension question. You're going to be, a little bit flexible with this depending on where you are within the section. So while I give you sort of ideal timing, when you're taking a practice test, you need to think about the bigger picture as well. All right. So for those of you who have contributed answers already, did it feel like this was an easy problem, a medium problem, hard? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. That's all across the board here. Easy or hard, easy, hopefully, right? That was a bit hard, yeah. So here the passage is so incredibly long. This would be very easy to struggle with. I think that though that when you are practicing reading in this style, the questions themselves actually become at least easier, if not easy, right? I can't ever guarantee that anything on the GMAT is going to be easy. Yeah, exactly. Question was easier if you did the reading in a good way. All right. So as we look at this, the primary purpose of the passage, this is a main idea question, which is awesome. I love it when main idea questions come up front here. I know that I'm already ready for this one. I saw a question earlier about, do I take notes? I typically do. I didn't for this particular read and these purposes, but I definitely like to create a passage map for myself. Other instructors say different things, but I find a passage map very helpful because I don't have to remember everything in my own brain. And I know that my own brain is going to be very fallible during the GMAT because as I get more stressed and as I get more tired, I'm going to tend to forget things. The best way to figure out what works best for you is simply to try different ways. So try several passages in which you do write notes, try several passages in which you do not. Make sure that you're reading the same way, no matter how you are taking notes or not taking notes, but see which one of those works out best for you. All right, so primary purpose, at this point, I either have my passage map or I just have the synthesis that I've already done from the passage. I know that I'm ready to answer it though. I don't have to go back to the passage and really look at any detail probably. So primary purpose, A, explain how non-random systems can produce unpredictable results. Ooh, I'm reading this one and I'm like, it's got a lot of buzzwords that I really like. I am not exactly sure if this is going to be the right answer. I'm always going to write a question mark next to something though that I feel good about, essentially. I'm like, ooh, maybe? Yeah, good question. A passage map is essentially the notes that you take about the passage. It's called a passage map because you want to take notes about main idea and about the structure. What is the purpose of each paragraph? How is the passage structured? All right, so we've got A as a maybe. B, trace the historical development of a scientific theory. I know that we talk about chaos theory. I can see that if I just kind of like look through for the word theory really quickly. I don't remember where we talked about like one specific theory. I think that some of his work could be considered that way, but what really bugs me about this answer in particular, even more than that, is the historical development. Now, in the information that I read, I remembered that there was some work that this mathematician had done and some experiments that he had run. We then jump into talking about chaotic and non-chaotic systems, the butterfly effect, uncertainty. We don't really trace the historical development of anything, so I really think the B is out. C, distinguish one theory from its opposite. Now, at first glance, I like this because I do have some opposites. But if I glance, again, just very quickly back at the passage, what I remember seeing as opposites were chaotic and non-chaotic systems, not theories. And I think that those words are different enough that it's really going to matter here. I don't think that I can say that a system is a theory. So I think that C is trying to trick me by pulling in some information that feels correct, but the specifics don't work out. D, describe the spread of a technical model from one field of study to others. Now, the technical model portion of it, I do remember reading about whenever he reran his model. But ultimately, after that, I don't remember this particular model being featured prominently. Then they start talking about specifically experiment and moving on again to chaotic, non-chaotic systems. And then the part about this answer choice that really bugs me is from one field of study to others. I'm just not seeing other fields of study really mentioned. The only field of study that I'm seeing is mathematician here. D is going to be out as well for this reason. All right, E, contrast possible causes of weather phenomena. Oof, this one is a classic example of a detail that's being brought in to masquerade as a main idea. So if you really got bogged into the detail here, I know that weather phenomena are mentioned a couple of times, but in the words that I was reading in those first topic sentences, it wasn't about weather phenomena. It was about this idea of chaotic and non-chaotic systems, about some kind of uncertainty that this mathematician uncovered. E is going to be out. Now, what's really interesting here is that I'm not 100% certain what A exactly means, but I kept it because it sounded pretty good. And this actually is the correct answer. So I'm going to read A just one more time, just to check. Explain how non-random systems can produce unpredictable results. Yeah, we talked a lot about systems. We talked in particular about chaotic and non-chaotic systems. And if I'm thinking about producing unpredictable results, that in particular is mentioned very frequently throughout this. And it makes a lot of sense. So when you are going through your individual questions here, the point being is that you can answer these main idea questions without understanding the detail. And in many cases, that is exactly what you should do, because you're going to be a lot less tempted to fall for those trap answers that are detail related, which is exactly what E would have been. All right, so for those of you who chose A, great job. For those of you who chose another answer choice, I'm actually very excited for you. I always say this in my classes too, but you learn a lot more from getting something wrong, getting a question wrong, than you do from getting it right. So for those of you who got it right, you did a great job. Maybe this isn't the lesson that you need to learn, but still make sure that you are practicing the process. For those of you who didn't get this right, make sure that you come back to this question in a couple of weeks. Circle back around, attempt it one more time, see if you can get it right, and if you have that takeaway that you need to be successful. You can find this passage in All the Verbal, which is a Manhattan Prep book if you have our books. It is in chapter 15, it's passage O. All right. We are going to be taking a look at another practice question here. So I am going to give you another minute and a half to work on this one coming up. That time is going to start right now. All right, that is a minute and a half. It goes by so quickly. Great, I'm seeing some answer choices here. This is a slightly different question. So as I start to read it, I see that it says, according to the passage, that means that this is a detail question. For those of you who have chosen an answer already, where did you look to find this detail? What paragraph was this located in? I am seeing third paragraph. Yeah, what is true about poppy seeds in bread dough? That is exactly what I was thinking. As we went through and did our first read through, I remember this idea of bread dough, right? That jumped out at me. Yeah, you first went to the second, but later went to the third, right? Because of the poppy seeds. Yep, exactly. But then you can kind of look around in the second and say, oof, I don't see any bread dough. Great. So when you see a detailed question like this, what you're going to do is go back and read the detail that you missed the first time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right. Chaotic systems such as, that's a good example introduction, such as a machine mixing bread dough are characterized by both attraction and repulsion. So that's that push and pull. As the dough is stretched, folded, and pressed back together, any poppy seeds sprinkled in are intermixed seemingly at random. But this randomness is illusory. In fact, the poppy seeds are captured by strange attractors, staggeringly complex pathways. Ooh, so I've just read a lot, I realized. I'm going to pause, even though I'm close to the end. I'm just going to think. So I'm reading about bread dough. It's being stretched and folded, and it seems like the poppy seeds are mixed at random, but it only seems that way. In fact, they're captured by these strange attractors, which sounds like, you know, Stranger Things, like some kind of strange, I'm not sure what, like a science fiction. Staggeringly complex pathways. So this is a modifier, and I know that it's describing strange attractors, which is a sentence correction skill, whose tangles appear accidental, but are in fact determined by the system's fundamental equations. So I'm hearing a lot of language here that's about, it seems accidental, it seems random, but really it's not random. And this idea that strange attractors are capturing the poppy seeds, essentially. Great, so I'm gonna go through and do exactly what I did before. I'm gonna eliminate answer choices. I'm gonna keep the ones that I'm not certain of and come back to them. Colleague once described this to me as going on like a speed date, essentially. Like you go on the first round of speed dating and you're like, yes, I want to talk to this person again, or no, I don't. The answer choices that stand out to you the first time around, you're like, I want to talk to you again. I'm not sure yet, but I want to talk to you again. So A, they have been individually stretched and folded over like miniature versions of the entire dough. Now, the question is, what is true about poppy seeds in bread dough? And I'm not seeing anything about the poppy seeds being individually stretched. And if I'm picturing a poppy seed even, I don't know how you would stretch a poppy seed. So A, I think, is out because I'm not seeing that detail listed in this paragraph. They are scattered in random clumps throughout the dough. Oof, this sounds good at first because it's talking about randomness, and man, it just seems really logical, doesn't it, that they be scattered randomly? But my GMAT brain knows that it cannot trust my logical everyday brain. So this is going to be out because as I was thinking about what the paragraph here was saying, it's saying it seems random, but it's really not random. They're accidentally caught in tangled objects called strange attractors. I know that I read strange attractors. I know that they were caught up in those. So I'm like, I'm going to keep this as a maybe. D, they are bound to regularly dispersed patterns of point attractors. Oof. Now, if I wasn't reading very carefully, I feel like this would be very tempting. But D, I'm ruling out because I know it's supposed to be strange attractors, and I don't know what point attractors are. E, they are in positions dictated by the underlying equations that govern the mixing process. So I'm gonna have to think about what this one means. They are in position, so their location is decided by the equations of the mixing process. And that sounds really, really close to what I read, especially in that last couple of lines. So I'm keeping this one. I'm going back to C. They're accidentally caught in tangled objects called strange attractors. I'm gonna have to look at the paragraph again. In fact, the poppy seeds are captured by strange attractors, staggeringly complex pathways. Yeah, so they're not tangled objects, and actually the seeds are not caught in strange attractors, they're caught by strange attractors. Wow, that's a small difference, but it's a big meaning change. So I'm going to rule out C and I'm going to choose E. And if I'm looking at the correct answer, it is E. So I saw that several of you chose E. How about this question? Was this one a little bit easier than the first one? A little bit harder? Comparable? Seeing same level? Easier, a little bit harder? It's perfectly okay, no matter what you say. So yeah, it takes a little longer to read, right? That's for sure. No matter what you say, whether it's easier or harder, what that's telling you isn't are you better or are you not good? It's telling you this is something that you need to work on. Yeah, Matthew. So definitely want to have this back and forth with the passage where you're kind of going back and making sure that you are comparing and contrasting. You don't have to do it with every single answer choice. Some of them I got rid of without referring back to the passage again, but especially when I got down to C and E, I was like, I definitely need to go back and do that one more time. Now, I mentioned before, you are going to have some flexibility in terms of how you spend your time, right? So if you can read the passage the first time just a little bit quicker, you'll have more time on the individual questions. That's part of the goal too of that first read through for me is I'm not trying to rush it, but by avoiding the detail, I'm making sure that I can move through it relatively quickly. That way I'm not rushed on answering the questions. I definitely don't want to do that to myself. All right. We, my friends, are doing one more question together, and then we're going to talk about some takeaways overall. And again, you can find all of these in your book. If you have purchased all the verbal book, those come with our courses as well. All right, so we are going to complete this question. I'm going to give you a minute and a half to do so again. Take a deep breath before you start and just let it go. That's always a really good way to just release some tension. Okay, your minute and a half is going to start right now. All right, that is a minute and a half. All right, I saw your note here. This was easier. That's great. That's awesome. And you know what? Some of these, once you do the reading in a really positive way, then the questions become easier. And that's a great way to get through the verbal section on the GMAT. If you are struggling to read, and then because you struggle to read, you struggle on the questions, oof, it can be a long 65 minutes. It's a long 65 minutes sometimes anyway. It really helps you to maintain a really positive outlook on that section too, honestly. And that can sometimes be half the battle. All right, so taking a look at this one, For all of those sending me answers, I'm seeing C's all over the place. I am just going to reveal to you right now that C is in fact the correct answer because it feels like everyone is on the right track here. Where did you find this information? So where did you look to discover this particular detail? Yeah, first paragraph. Absolutely. All right, small rounding errors. That was one of the first things that we read about, small rounding errors. And then I was like, too much detail, we're moving on. All right, let's go back and read it again. So around 1960, mathematician Edward Lorenz found unexpected behavior in apparently simple equations representing atmospheric airflows. Whenever he reran his model with the same inputs, different outputs resulted, although the model lacked any random elements. So again, we read this part before, but I'm just thinking he saw some things that were unexpected. Lorenz realized that tiny rounding errors in the initial data mushroomed over time, leading to erratic results. So tiny rounding errors got bigger. His findings marked a seminal moment in the development of chaos theory, which, despite its name, has little to do with randomness. That's super weird. I really thought that chaos theory, you would think that that would have to do with randomness. Great, so the tiny rounding errors sounds like they started off in a very small way and they got bigger over time. And he kind of realized this at some point in his research. All right, so taking a look at the answer choices. According to the passage, this is detail, that's how we knew to go back to the passage and look for this. The small rounding errors in Lorenz's model rendered the results unusable. Oof, unusable. Please, his findings marked a seminal moment in the development of chaos theory. That sounds pretty usable. Were deliberately included. Come on, Lorenz realized that they were there and they were errors. He didn't put them in there on purpose. C, we're going to keep, had a surprisingly large impact over time. Yeah, they mushroomed, right? That sounds logical. Were at least partially expected given the complexity of the atmosphere. This is an answer choice that you might choose if you're letting your outside brain kind of do the thinking. You want your GMAT brain to do the thinking. This seems logical, right? Like I would expect rounding errors if there's complex information, but that's not what the passage tells me. So I have to rule this one out. Shrank to insignificant levels? Absolutely not. This was unexpected. He was trying to figure out why this was occurring. All that we're left with ultimately then is C. So taking a look at this one, it becomes a lot easier, especially if you're reading this again in that really big kind of energetic way. Jessica, I just saw your question about inference questions. I do have a tip about inference questions. I'll wrap up with this and then I'll chat about that. All right. I think that you've all done a really good job with this so far. Make sure that you go and practice this. A couple of notes about other types of RC questions. This one is an all of the following except question. When you are running behind on time, these are great questions to skip. Take a look at them, see what stands out to you that you can eliminate with certainty, and then try to make your best guess and move on. If you have enough time, then certainly attempt these, but they're good ones to skip because it takes a lot more back and forth with the passage, or at least it can, in order to figure out what the right answer is. For inference questions in particular, Jessica, if you're struggling with those, what you want to keep in mind about inference questions is that you're not going to infer very far at all. In fact, you're going to take the information they give you in the passage and you're going to state it in a slightly different way, and that's the inference. So that tends to be the biggest thing that people struggle with that question type, is trying to infer too much. So trying to bring in new information that wasn't stated. You can almost read this one, honestly, as an inference answer choice. So it had a surprisingly large impact over time. The initial data mushroomed. It's stated slightly differently. Not exactly the same way. That's kind of like what you're going to see with an inference type question. So practice making sure that you are not inferring anything that's not stated directly. All right. Final takeaways. So make sure that you are using your first reading comprehension read through to really understand the main idea. When you see that main idea question, then you're going to use that knowledge from your first read through in order to answer it. You can also use your passage map. And again, those are the notes that you take when you were writing. I believe that we have a recording from the past as well about how to create a good passage map. An RC detail question. So when you see a detail question, go back to the passage, figure out where that detail lives, do a little bit of rereading. You should have the time at that point. And I can guarantee you that you don't have the time to analyze the answer choices without having a clear direction, right? So if you don't have the time to read it, then it's a good question to skip. When you see an all of the following except question, check how much time you have. Really think about whether you need to bail on those types of questions. My final comment that I'm going to leave you with is that not every question is important. You want to think about the big picture in order to get the goal score that you're looking for, which means that some problems are going to help you more than others. The problems that are most helpful are the ones that are at your ability level or below your ability level. So when you get to the end of a section, say you scored a 37 on the reading comprehension section. If you scored a 37, then any question that was at that ability level or below, if you miss it, those hurt you more. The higher difficulty questions are not going to impact your score as much. So really think about what is the difficulty of the question in front of me. Try to assess that and think about whether it's really going to help you if you get it right or whether it's going to hurt you if you get it wrong. Because not every single problem is necessary to answer correctly. So you really want to make sure that you're doing some prioritizing and spending your time where it's going to be the most impactful for your score. Awesome. So before you all leave, please write down one takeaway that you have that you would like to implement on either main idea or detail questions. And if you have any final questions, then please send those my way as well as we wrap up here. Yep, missing target score because taking time on detail questions. Yeah, and those are questions that are really good to make sure that you practice, but also on the test, if you're running behind on time and you see a detail question, great opportunity to just take the bail and move on. Learning to bail is a tough one. I like to do time sets in which I don't give myself quite enough time. So I'll do, let's say, a reading comprehension passage and 3 questions. And typically you would get about 7.5 minutes maybe on those. Try to give yourself 6. It'll make you really force yourself to make some tough decisions. And that gets you into the practice of bailing. Yeah, avoid those details. I'm so glad that I'm seeing people talking about avoiding the details because I love avoiding the details. Very difficult to bail, definitely. Yeah, you really want to take your time with the answers. I like that one. That's a good takeaway. You're not trying to find the right answer. That's very hard to do. You're trying to find the wrong answers because then the right one is just going to be left behind. Yeah, absolutely. So Manhattan Prep definitely offers courses. My course actually comes up shortly here. I have one starting on June 9th. It is a split course, so it's on Wednesdays and Saturdays, which is kind of nice. Caleb, what's another question type to avoid if short on time? You really want to assess what types of questions you tend to perform less well on, essentially. So when you take a practice test, look at what questions you do better on and what questions you tend not to get right frequently. Those are the questions to avoid if you're short on time. Always assess difficulty level though, because if you're skipping a lot of easy questions just because they're questions that you struggle with, those are going to hurt your score. If they're difficult questions though, and it's a question that you already don't do well on, let's say inference as an example, that's a perfect question to skip. Absolutely ideal. Yeah, the difficulty is train yourself on avoiding the detail. And the best way to do that is to practice, right? So read the newspaper, read practice passages, read economist articles, Do something like that and really train yourself to notice like, oh, I'm getting into detail category now. This is not about the main idea anymore. My course is listed on Manhattan Prep's website. Live online summer D is what you would want to write down here. That is going to get you to where you want to go. It is open for enrollment still, starting up soon. How do I figure out which ones to bail at? Yeah, I think that summarizes it really. Like, I just know my strengths and weaknesses as a test taker. There are certain types of sentence correction problems for me in particular that I'm going to look at. And if it's underlined completely and it seems really difficult, then I know those for me tend to be a struggle. And so I'm like, no, thank you. I'm going to pass if I'm running behind on time. I don't only bail when I'm running behind on time, though. I also tend to bail if I am, if I'm feeling really just tired mentally. So sometimes I'll stop and give myself just really quick little like 30-second brain breaks throughout the section. And that's something that I've been recommending to a lot of my students as well, because if you look at your practice tests, and some of you will see this, if you look at your practice tests and you notice around the middle of the section a long string of missed answers and you're like, well, why'd that happen? It's probably because you got tired. So giving yourself some short little breaks in the middle can really help. And all you have to do is just kind of sit back and stare off, daydream for like 30 seconds or so, a minute if you can spare it, and then get right back in the game. Is it better to skip entirely or, I would say if you have a few seconds and you can at least eliminate a couple of answer choices, then that helps your chances, right? So if you can look at a problem and read it and eliminate a couple of choices, you're starting off at a 20% chance of guessing the right answer. You know, one of five answer choices. You can get rid of two of those, all of a sudden it's a 33% chance. So that gets a lot better. If you can eliminate three and you're down to two answer choices, oof, do not sit and like belabor that point with yourself. Just take the guess and move on to another question, because at that point you have a 50-50 shot of guessing the right answer. That is awesome. I'll take those odds any day. All right. Excellent. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it as well. So we have these free prep hours periodically. There are typically a couple per month. I will be having another one coming up in June on the 17th, I believe. Absolutely, but please go check out our YouTube channel. There are other ones that are recorded that are out there that are extremely helpful. And we have some coming up live in the future again. Thank you all so much for attending, and please check out my course if you are interested. All right, have a great evening.